this video I'll be looking at the album And Then There Were Three by Genesis. Now this group had survived the early loss of co-founder Peter Gabriel, who had left to work on his solo career in '74. They had reassembled to take the band forward, releasing material that some regarded as more understandable to the fans without forgetting their prog roots. But now they were faced with master guitarist Steve Hackett leaving to develop his solo career. So would the band continue as a threesome? And if so, what would the dynamic look like? And more importantly, sound like? More of that in a moment. Hi there, my name's Dave and I just love to talk about progressive rock. So in today's video we travel back to 1978 and pick up the story of a band at a crossroads. The creative and exuberant Steve Hackett decided to leave the group as he felt strangled by the others and had expressed the difficulty trying to get his material added into the group's projects. So as a result he decided he was try his luck out on his own. Now Mike Rutherford never claimed to be guitarist extraordinaire like Hackett, and this creative loss needed to be addressed somehow. So with this album it saw a subtle change in approach in that the guitar work was simplified to a large extent, but more emphasis was placed on Banks' keyboard work. Another thing that changed was the implied request from Atlantic Records themselves for the band to focus on shorter tracks that would offer more radio appeal, thereby lay the rubber the green. Many of the ideas brought into this project had already been preconceived by the three of them, and these now needed to be altered to fit the new suggestions issued from the record company. It's no surprise to see that all but two of the tracks now fitted into that 3, 4, 5 minute time formula. So the final version of the album that appeared had 11 tracks and lasted just over 53 minutes. But first of all, starting off with the album cover, this was designed by Storm Thorgerson and Aubrey Powell of Hypnosis. Now, Thorgerson later said that the cover was trying to tell a story of the traces left by the light trails. The photograph was shot using time-lapse to represent the comings and goings in the album's lyrics and over the change in personnel. It was never a favourite album cover of mine at all. So the opening track is Down and Out and was written by the three of them during rehearsals. Collins' lyrics wrote about the way that some US record companies could drop artists literally the moment they go out of fashion. This maybe was the sign to all that things had to change. The Tony Banks composition Undertow follows next, and it was originally a much longer piece as there was an additional 2-minute piano introduction that was eventually dropped as the band were already very mindful that many of the songs had become keyboard top heavy. I'm pleased to say that this section did eventually resurface on Tony's debut album in the track From the Undertow. Ballad of Big is next, and this was a creation from Phil Collins and was a track based on a big fictitious cowboy called Jim Cooley. It is strange that on an English progressive rock album there is such a tune about cowboys, but it was a result of Phil having a massive interest in all things cowboy related, whilst also having a keen passion for the history of the Alamo, so we'll let him off this time for that one. Snowbound is very interesting lyrically as it's a romantic song about someone who deals with their inhibitions by hiding in a snowman suit, but after a period of time is unable to be without it and it becomes his crutch in life. At rehearsals, Collins originally played the drums to this track at a brisk tempo, however the other two requested that it be played slower and was something that eventually he saw the benefit of. Last up on side one was Burning Rope. Now this was a Banks composition that was originally seen as a piece in the same vein and something to resemble One for the Vine from Wind and Wuthering. There was a point where a mass orchestra part would be included with this track to stretch it over 10 minutes long. However, the final length was 7 minutes but included a guitar solo that Rutherford struggled to get right. Ultimately, it did become a source of some pride for Mike once the piece was finished. The second side kicks off with Deep in the Mother Lode and was a Rutherford composition penned from a famous phrase from Horace Greeley, the founder of the highest selling paper in the country, the Tribune, who popularised the slogan "Go West, young man, and grow up with the country," which Rutherford adopted for the basis of this track. The song tells of a fictional young man who seeks to find his fortune in the Nevada gold rush, being urged on by his family to find as much gold as he could. We've all lived that dream at one time or another. Many Too Many follows and is described as a simple love song by Banks. It was released as a single and achieved minor chart success, reaching 43 in the UK charts and heralded the last use of the mellotron by that keyboard player. The single release was interesting as the track was part of an EP with 2 other tracks, but more of that in a moment. Scenes from A Night's Dream comes next and is a Collins and Banks composition and is based on the children's strip cartoon character Little Nemo, which was in a book that Collins bought for his brother many years earlier as a present. Tony wrote the music and initially was to provide the lyrics as well, as he struggled to get any meaningful content into the track, so he spoke to Collins to finish it off for him. Say It's Alright Joe is written about an out-and-out drunk and was originally a send-up of a Dean Martin "Set 'em up Joe" character. It's quite an airy ballad that Phil pulls out the stops on to make it a believable track. The music turns from gentle to explosive to perhaps highlight the contradictions within an alcoholic state. The Lady Lies is about a woman who was rescued from the mouth of a monster before turning on the man and manifesting into a demon and seducing him into her lair, where he is unable to escape and presumably perishes. It's a return to the storytelling style from the very best of the tracks by the band, but this one does not really live up to its predecessors. We end with Follow You, Follow Me, and this was the song that became the band's turning point in my mind. As spurred on by the record company, they wrote a simple 3 or 4 minute love song followed by that verse-chorus path, never before used by the band. It became their biggest selling single and was specifically written to attempt to balance up what was traditionally a male-orientated audience. The words were written by Mike Rutherford, who claims it took only 10 minutes to write as a whole. It's a nice single and catchy, and you can see the appeal in fairness. The album has often been heavily criticised as signalling the end of a progressive Genesis to a more chart-based Genesis, which was true by and large, but whereas with the loss of the eccentricities of Gabriel's writing, singing and flute playing, which stripped the band of much of its individuality, somehow it had survived and moved on. The real turning point was the removal of the strength of Hackett's imperious guitar virtuosos, that finally exposed some of the band's limitations. Now, it's not for me to say whether the band made the right or wrong choices in changing direction, but all I can say is that Genesis with Steve Hackett in it always sounded a more balanced outfit than it did without him. Just my opinion. Mike Rutherford is an outstanding bass player and capable guitarist, however he was a country mile below the standard set by Steve Hackett. Few would measure up to that challenge in fairness. There are many examples on this album where his lead guitar work sounds limited and really often quite clumsy. I'm sorry to say that, Mike. It's no surprise that he would only ever play lead guitar in gigs where these album tracks were included, and he was more than content to play bass and 12-string on all the other Genesis live tracks. Thank heavens for the dexterity of Daryl Stuermer being sourced for those concert performances. That result meant relying more and more on keyboard overdubs to fill in the holes in the overall quality of the sounds. Other changes already mentioned are the reduction in song length to cater more for quantity rather than quality, and this was a clear attempt to look to change the demographic makeup to attract a younger audience, as well as courting the influential American radio market locals' wishes. I pondered long and hard over the selection of my best 3 tracks, but here they are, and in no particular order, I might add. And I begin with where the album begins, with Down and Out. As so many fans would have been particularly eager to hear exactly what the new 3-piece Genesis outfit would sound like, it certainly would have whetted the appetite for the vast majority of diehards, as it closely resembled the traditional soundbite of the band. The opening attempts to create some of the kind of guitar riff to appease the Hackettless fans, but there's little fluidity or style to the selection. My second best track is Snowbound, which encompasses storytelling with strong musical themes to accompany this track, and really is one of the best on the album. I really like that this track is a strong song throughout. Now, my third best track is Many Too Many, and whilst it does represent the changing of the old guard, it really is a good tune. Vocally, Collins is a little exposed in stretching for some of the notes, but his style of song becoming associated with the band and also in their solo work after this album. Back in the day, when albums were only produced on vinyl, there was a definitive time span that could be fitted onto each side of the vinyl record. It was around the 23 to 25 minutes in length, there or thereabouts. Bearing in mind this restriction, the band had 2 more songs that didn't quite make this final cut, but merited release anyway. They utilised the hack of releasing an EP, an extended play single, and this was the case here. The main track was Many Too Many from the album, but the first of the other tracks was called The Day the Lights Went Out, which merited particular mention. Now, it's loosely based around the tale of some kind of earth-shattering event that threatens the very core of mankind. It featured a strong performance from Mike Rutherford, who is on bass guitar duties here and packs a brilliant performance into the riff. It enhanced the track no end, so well done you, Mike. The second hidden track is called Vancouver, and it's a simple ditty involving a young girl running away from her family, but getting cold feet right at the end, swallowing her pride and returning home, but sadly before anybody had actually missed it. The lyrics are quite emotional on this, and it may be that which draws me so closely to this one as a personal favourite. For me, it was an album that paved the way from that traditional prog sound to one of more intentionally focused songs that would attract a different, younger, more female audience, I might say. Thinking back to the late 70s, prog rock had become something of a dirty word, and Genesis were not the only group looking to change focus. Some say it was inevitable, some say they sold out, some say it was all Phil Collins' fault. Truth is, it was probably none of those reasons really, and just an inevitable shift in the part of the music scene. I can't help but wonder what the band might have sounded like had Steve stuck around, but it's all water under the bridge now. So there you go, those are my thoughts on the album. What I do have for you now is more reviews and reactions featuring Genesis, and a full album review of A Trick of the Tail that was another monumental release following the departure of Peter Gabriel.